All right, so Sage, do we have a nice shot of that dragon?
Yes.
All right, very good, because we can't neglect the dragon. I'm sure there's, bad karma that comes along with that or something. All right, but what we're talking about today is, as I promised from last week, we're going to talk about the philosophies of governing in the new country of China. But before we get to that, we have to do what?
Review.
Yes, so we have to do our review because last Wednesday was a long, long, long time ago. So I'll just do a little bit of review. We talked about the formation of brand new China. And it started out as what?
All those different kingdoms.
The warring states. Yes, all those different kingdoms, Effie, that's exactly right.
Who said it first?
Yeah. Oh, who?
Ian.
Oh, Ian said it first. Well, Ian moved his seat and I can't hear him now
Oh,
because he's way back there. So there are mainly 7. The largest are the 7 states, and they are warring against one another, and emerging from that is who?
Han.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't.
Yeah, Qin Shi Huang
I forgot how to pronounce it. Shin.
emerges from that, and he unifies all those states, and we have the country of China. We also have the story of his life. Do you remember?
Yeah.
My gosh, it was quite a story too, wasn't it? But where did we get it from?
Him.
Him. Yeah, do you remember him?
Sima.
Yeah. Sima Xian.
Xian.
And he wrote this how much later?
I forgot.
400 years?
It was between 100 and 200 years after the death of the first emperor, and he's from a different dynasty, right? He's from the Han dynasty. So, but what he told us was, it was just an intriguing story. It was just filled with absolutely everything you could want in a great story, right? You remember this?
Yeah.
Okay, so his father, who was the king of Qin, probably wasn't his father, remember?
I know, it got complicated.
It got very complicated, yes. So the prime minister, Liu Bei, the prime minister was having an affair with his mother,
Uh-huh.
and her son might not have been the son of the king, but the son of the prime minister. He was a little bit nervous about that, so he arranged for her to have an affair with this guy. Remember him?
Uh-huh.
Lao? And then he got a little full of himself because he and she had what?
2 boys.
2 children, and so he decided he was going to go for a coup, wasn't he?
Didn't work.
And it didn't work. Yeah. Yes, it was a devastating situation because he put down that rebellion, but in the process, he had to eliminate all of his family members. So it is a very, very intriguing story, but that is our source. Our source comes over 100 years later from the dynasty that took over the Qin dynasty. But upon his putting down this coup, stopping this rebellion, he decides it's never going to happen again. And he develops what?
He built his big army.
Yeah, he built his big army. This is not an army of farmers that are just picking up their weapons to go do battle when needed. This is what?
That's a standing army.
It's a standing. Hi, John.
Hi.
It's a standing, professional, trained army, and the number of his army, does anybody remember what he got up to?
God, I thought it was over a million.
Yes, exactly. Yes, that you're exactly right. So he had an army that was 1 million strong, and if you've got a trained professional army that's 1 million strong, what do?
Like,
Well, you take over countries.
that's what you do.
That's what you do. All right, that's the reason to have that army. So that's exactly what he did. And once he accomplished that, well, he had to go on and do some other things, and we're going to remember them quickly right now. Remember, he built canals. He built roads connecting the new unified country. And we also remember that he eliminated all of the currency except for his own, his native currency, and implemented a weights and measure system that was just from his country, so that everywhere you go in China, the newly developed China, everything will be the same and everything will be fair. So he did that as well. He also unified the script, so the writing was one set of symbols, there was one form of writing, and that was important because
People could read.
so people can read and not misunderstand. Transactions are going to be correct and accurate if you do that. You remember the books?
Yeah.
The books that we saw last week? And these are laws. So he also ended the system of feudalism, and he implemented a system of laws. And then after he did all that, he decided to do, something really big.
He built an army of terracotta soldiers.
Yes, well, before he did that, actually that took decades. But before he did that, he did something else.
Oh, yeah. you did.
Remember that?
Yes.
Yeah, how could you forget that? And then there's an even better part of the story. Like, this story couldn't get any better. That's what you think, but then it does. Because remember his quest for eternal life? He didn't want to die, and so they brought him tablets of, mercury. And he took these tablets of mercury, thinking that he was going to live forever. This was going to prolong his life. But it didn't. What did it do instead?
Poisoned him.
It killed him, exactly. But that's okay because they were ready for that, right? They had a tomb all ready for him. And this is guarding his tomb. This is the terracotta army.
Boy, did you ever see it in real life? It's overwhelming.
I saw it in New York.
Yeah. How many of you have been there and saw this?
I went.
Yeah, several people were saying that. Yes.
Yes. In China.
Yeah. Does anyone want to share? Well, Joe told us a great story last week. A funny story last week. Does anybody want to say anything about it as we're looking at look at this. This is incredible.
It's overwhelming, really. If you see all of it, it stretches for miles, I swear.
Yes.
Going this way, too.
Yeah.
And they've got everything that you would need in that kind of war. They had everything.
Yeah, the weapons were real.
Yes.
They weren't made of clay. They were real weapons. Yeah. So it's just pretty amazing. And then what has not been opened is the tomb.
The tomb.
But the tomb was described, and it sounds just too fantastic to conceive of. But there's a whole city down there. There's a whole replica of his country down there with rivers of mercury. So it's pretty fantastic. It's pretty amazing. What was he?
Tyrant.
They called him a tyrant. Yep. And we get this from who?
That's his name. Shen?
Yes. So we have our information is largely coming from Sima Qian.
Yeah.
But we do have some archaeological evidence of this as well. And what the historian is telling us is that the governing system, which is what we're talking about today, was that of legalism. That's one of many, many governing philosophies of that time. And legalism does seem to have been the mode that first emperor went for. So what is it? The belief system is that people are just bad. They're bad, they're not gonna care for others, they're always gonna act in their best interest. Effie, last week you said the philosophy is that people are evil. Yeah, people are selfish, they're evil, and that's the basis that they're going off of, all right? So if people are inherently bad, then the only way you can get them to act correctly is within a system of reward and punishment. Reward and punishment. And so therefore, there is this law, all of these laws, this code, the code of law, and there were hundreds of them, absolutely hundreds of them. We think of law, we have law, we live in a country of rules and punishment, right? And when we think of law, the law is for who?
All of us.
All of us, exactly. The law is for all of us. But over 2,000 years ago, in this time and in this place, the law and the thinking of the law, it's not for the people. It's not for the individual rights and safety of the people. The law is established for the king and the kingdom. All right? Because the king has to be able to function and endure, and the kingdom has to remain strong and also function and endure. So now we remember that Qin Shi Huang unified the writing, correct?
Yes.
All right, and we think, oh, that's very nice. And remember, he sent out scholars and taught everybody in the land the writing. These are the symbols that we're going to use unilaterally. And we thought that was a pretty nice thing to do. But what else does that accomplish if everyone can read?
You get rid of ignorance. That's what that's saying.
But you also don't have an excuse. You can't say that you don't know the law,
No.
right?
You can control it.
Yes. Yeah, so now they've taught everybody how to read, they've sent out these new laws, everybody's able to read it, there's no excuse. You can't then say, well, I didn't know. Because everybody did know, because he made sure that everybody would know. And here's how it all goes down, okay? Now, you are supposed to live by all of these rules, all of these laws, and you are also supposed to make sure that your neighbor is living up to all of these laws, okay? And if you neglect to report, do you all know who that is? All right.
She's a snoop.
If you neglect to report on your neighbor breaking one of the laws for any kind of an infraction, then you will be punished in the equivalent of that crime, whatever the crime is. Okay? If you didn't punish, if you didn't report, you too are punished.
What about Texas?
Sounds like, oh, yes, it does, doesn't it? All right, so there's pressure on you to turn in your neighbors. There's pressure on you to do this. And if you decide, all right, well, I'm under pressure, I better say something. But if you say something falsely, if you accuse falsely, and you're discovered, you also will be punished in accordance to what you accuse that person of. All right, so you're going to get punished if you lie and falsely accuse somebody.
That's fair.
That's fair? Somebody likes this?
Well, To me, you just keep your mouth shut and go about your business.
But there was pressure on you if you didn't report something, you could also be punished.
No, I'm good at ignoring. I'd be very good at ignoring.
You'd keep your head down?
Yes.
So, yeah, I can see you doing that.
Yeah, I would.
All right, I can see you doing that.
Wouldn't turn anybody in.
All right. So confessions. How are they extracting confessions? What do you think? Any guesses?
Torture.
Torture. Exactly. So they're getting confessions as a result of torture. So you can see that this is a pretty effective system that they've got going on.
It's horrible, horrible.
We haven't learned much. It's horrible. Well, you're not going to like this one. The next one is just beyond my comprehension. All right, if somebody commits suicide, someone in the family must pay for that crime. Committing suicide is a crime. And if somebody if somebody in your family does this, someone else has to pay the penalty.
That's horrible.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah, that is horrible. Well, the Qin dynasty is an equal opportunity employer punisher.
Yeah.
All right, so what they do is something that's unique in this time, in this place. It doesn't matter what rank you are. It doesn't matter if you're nobility. These laws and the punishments are across the board, therefore everyone. No one is exempt from this. So what are the punishments? What would the punishments be? Well, you have your traditional execution. There's some mutilation, like if you steal, they might cut your hand off. There's branding. All right, they could brand you. But the most popular punishment, I want you to take a look at the photos I'm showing you right now as I tell you, the number one most popular punishment is
Isolation.
slave labor. Edith got it. Look at the photos. Look at the photos. Slave labor.
Okay.
See what I'm saying? Yes, Barbara.
My favorite punishment is when they get a big cauldron of boiling water and they suspend the person above it and lower them 1 inch an hour until they die.
That's your favorite?
That's my of all the punishments I've read.
I never want to make you mad at me, ever.
That's appalling.
Isn't it appalling?
It is.
Can you imagine anybody doing that to anybody?
I know, I can't imagine, no, I truly can't. No, it's all beyond my comprehension.
1 inch an hour. It usually took 24 hours before the person died.
Ugh, oh.
Yeah.
Well, we look at all of Qin Shi Huang's accomplishments and we're just stunned. It's astonishing, we're amazed. And he gets credit for it, doesn't he? But who actually did it?
Slaves.
Slave labor. All right, so is it any wonder if he wanted to get the credit for these buildings and roads and all of these fantastic things, is it any wonder that he would favor a system of legalism where the punishment can be slave labor? And how many of those millions of people do you think were guilty of crimes? But what did he get himself with the system, with the legalist system? He got himself quite a workforce that was able to accomplish all of these fantastic
You didn't have to pay them either.
Well, that's what, exactly. As he just said, he didn't have to pay them. No, it's slave labor. Slave labor. And it must have been millions of people that were working on these remarkable accomplishments that he gets credit for, but it was just from his directive. And it was done on the backs of slave labor. All right, so that's how he's functioning. And do you remember last week that we also had read that he burned books? Do you remember that?
Yes.
He burned all the books except for what? Do you remember farming? You could have a book on farming, and there were books on medicine. But what was he burning?
Was it religious books?
All the opposition, all the other theories.
Exactly. That's exactly right. You're both right. Religion, that's an excellent comment. And Edith, all the other theories. And at that time, there were a multitude of other philosophies of how to govern, how to behave, how to be the best human that you can be. And some of them were incredible. We're going to take a look at them, a couple of them today, but he doesn't want those available, does he?
No, apparently not.
No, he doesn't want those around. However, archaeologists have found graves with the books. Remember, I keep showing you those books because I'm just in love with them. But people were buried with those books, those philosophy books. They've found those philosophy books in wells, buried deep in wells. So they found them. And the other thing is, they weren't entirely lost because Qin Shi Huang himself kept a library of all of those schools of thought.
Banned book.
He had them. Yeah, he had the banned books. He had them. They didn't go away, but he didn't want the scholars to have them because the scholars would go out into the country and teach. And what would they teach? Ideas of freedom and, yes, a multitude of different ideas. And he didn't want that. He needed it to be as he had set it up. Okay. In this time of these different philosophies, it is what? The warring states. So if he's burning the books, it predates him, correct? So what he wants to do is get rid of the philosophies from the ancestors. These are books that predate the Qin dynasty, and they're written in the time of the Zhou dynasty and the collapse of the Zhou dynasty, and during the time of the warring states, where there are lots and lots of ideas about how to come together, because all of these areas are continuously in battle against one another. It's chaos. It's chaos. So all of these different ideas come about. They call it the time of 100 schools of thought. 100 schools of thought. So we're going to look at a couple of them, and remember, this predates the Qin dynasty. These are the ideas that Qin Shi Huang wants to get rid of, that he wants to burn. All right. Has anybody ever heard of this person? Lao Tzu. I'm probably not pronouncing that correct.
No.
Lao Tzu. Has anybody heard of him?
No.
Well, maybe you'll recognize it as we go on. I'll tell you his story.
He's got a nice beard.
He has a nice beard, yeah. I agree. And look, he has a nice, see the book?
Yeah.
All right, yeah, he has the book. All right, so he has a pretty interesting story. He's born during this time, about 2,500 years ago, when there's warring states and chaos, and everybody is trying to do their own thing, and yet nobody's succeeding at it. And so he's trying, in this kind of futile effort, to bring his state together, to be a voice of reason, but it's not happening. Nothing is happening. And so he is so frustrated that he decides He's going to leave the city. He's going to go up into the mountains, and he's going to become a hermit. All right, he's done. He's had it. He's had enough. But he gets to the city gates, and there's a guard there. And the guard says to him, okay, he recognizes him as one of the wise men of the court, and he says to him, well, I will let you pass, but before I let you pass, I'd really love it if you could impart to me some wisdom. So Lao Tzu sits down and he starts writing a book. Okay? Does anybody have any idea what the book is? I'll bet you heard of that.
Of the way, I've heard of it.
Have you all heard of it? The Tao Te Ching?
The book of the way.
It's a book of wisdoms. It's a book of wisdoms. When we had this like the New Age movement in the 60s, do you all remember that? It resurfaced here. So this is 2,500 years old, and he's written, sometimes it's pronounced like a D, but it's hard to translate this language, so it comes out with a T, but it's really Tao. Tao is how you pronounce it. All right, and what does that mean?
The way.
What's the Tao?
It's the way.
The way.
The way.
That's all it means. The Tao is the way. All right, that's all. It's a very simple word, and that's all that it means. What is the way? Well, according to Lao Tzu, the way simply means that all of the earth, all of creation, all of the universe is in a motion, and that we aren't separate from that motion. We're part of the motion. We're part of the motion, and if we think of ourselves as being a separate entity, we're going to be going against this. And so what does the Tao tell us to do? Go with the flow. Yeah, just go with the flow. Don't fight against it. We're just a part of everything that's happening, and so we don't have to do anything. We don't have to stand alone. We're just going to go with the flow. The Tao also tells us something else that's really hard for us to conceive of. You know what this is, right? What's that called?
Yin and yang.
Yes, that's the yin and the yang, all right? And we have the counterpart over here. In Western thought, we have good and we have evil, and those are two separate things, right? Something is either good or it's evil, correct? Yep, it's two separate entities. But with Taoism, yin and yang means there isn't anything that's one or the other. It's both. It's both. And it's cyclical. So darkness isn't evil, because darkness eventually turns into light. Day comes in the morning and night comes in the evening. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. So there's no such thing as good and evil. It's a balance of opposites. If an example of that would be, if you never knew anything bad, you never ever knew anything bad, like hunger. If you've never known hunger. Hi, Peggy. Would you know what it was to be satisfied? If you never knew anything bad, would you be able to define what good is? If you don't know bad, you can't know good. Do you see what I'm saying? All right. Have you heard of Qi?
Yes.
Qi, what's Qi?
She is like your soul.
Yeah, like your soul. That's a good one. Did someone else say something? Mary?
Your life force.
Yes, Barbara, exactly. It's your life force, it's energy. So the Taoists believe not only are we a part of everything that there is, but it's all energy. All right, and you have to respect and understand that energy. And your energy is a part of the universe's energy. So it's all the same thing. Okay, do you know what that reminds me of? I had to put this up here and share it with you because we've gone over this before. In Head Talks, we've done physics. And does it remind anybody of anything in theoretical physics? String theory,
Oh,
right? So does the Qi remind you of this Taoist philosophy says that everything is energy and we're a part of everything. And string theory says, and it's a theory, says that every single thing is like a tiny ribbon of vibrating energy. So it's really the same thing. And the Taoism is over 2,000 years old. And now science is saying something that sounds very similar. Isn't that interesting? Okay, would you like to hear a little example of what's in the Tao Te Ching?
sure,
Yes.
sure.
I thought you might like a little sample of it.
You can empty your mind of all thoughts. Your heart will embrace the tranquility of peace. Watch the workings of all of creation, but contemplate their return to the source. All creatures in the universe return to the point where they began. Returning to the source is tranquility, because we submit to heaven's mandate. Returning to heaven's mandate is called being constant. Knowing the constant is called enlightenment. Not knowing the constant is the source of evil deeds, because we have no roots. By knowing the constant, we can accept things as they are. By accepting things as they are, we become impartial. By being impartial, we become one with heaven. And by being one with heaven, we become one with Tao. Being one with Tao, we are no longer concerned about losing our life because we know the Tao is constant and we are one with Tao.
So it's not a large book. So before the God would let Lao Tzu go into the mountains and become a hermit, he had him write down all of these things that we know of today as the Tao Te Ching. And if you want to read it, you can get a copy of it. It's not very long, but it's exactly what you just heard. A whole bunch. I forget how many there are. I want to say 81, but I'm not sure if that's correct. But it's just something very nice to read, and it's just thoughts to ponder. And their philosophy, that philosophy is simply to be in harmony with nature. But before we move away from this philosophy, I would never want you to think that they were unproductive or lazy or just kind of laid back, because they've created some spectacular things. Let me show you. These are Taoist temples in China. I don't even think I need to do anything else. I think we can just all go home now. I mean, was that like, did that just take your breath away?
Something else.
Oh,
Are there lots and lots of those? It was hard for me to tell, only that they were all different shots.
oh, they are all, yeah, they were all different. Can you imagine building those where they are? Oh my gosh. Yeah, there are several of those. They're all over the world too, because Taoism is it's not an overly popular faith, like Confucianism is predominant in China, but Taoism is a very popular
Right.
ideology.
I have friends in New Jersey
Who are Taoists, and there are Taoist temples here in the United States. They're all over the world. But you see how they want to be. You see how it's so deeply spiritual. It's very deeply spiritual. But that lifted up the human being. And if you're under a legalistic system, you're not going to want something like this floating around because it elevates the soul.
Untrue.
It's very contrary.
You know, I mean, the way,
Yeah.
to live the way they did with trying to find peace within themselves and live in the universe.
Exactly.
They wouldn't go along with legalism at all.
It's the polar opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the polar opposite. And so that was existing. That was something that would have been burned. That's something that he would have wanted to destroy. This too. So you know who this is. Where did our wood land? Who has Confucius?
That's the wood carving.
Where's the wood carving? David, did you get to see this? I just have to, you saw it, right, Edith?
No, I haven't read it yet.
You haven't met him yet? Okay.
Beautifully done, oh, please.
So Confucius, you can see that Confucius predates, all right, BCE? Yes, all right, and you've all heard of Confucius. Do you know where his name comes from?
No.
Yeah, it's interesting because his name is actually Confuci. So when you Latinize the name, can you hear it? Confuci, and and his name is Kong. So what it means is Grand Master Kong. But as it's translated into Latin, it comes out Confucius. All right. He has a very interesting birth story. He has a miraculous birth. Have you heard this story? Because I don't want to tell you stuff you already know. All right, no, I know that you don't know this. It's fabulous. So the birth story is that Confucius is born to a very young mother, and the father is many years older. The father had several daughters, and he was worried he would never have a son, and so this young lady was willing to marry a old man. I guess it was quite scandalous at the time. So she did that. But upon the birth of her child, who was a boy, there were 5 wise men that appeared. There were dragons in the sky announcing this birth. And then the most curious thing approached the mother when she gave birth to this baby boy. This is a quillin. Have you heard of the quillin?
No.
The quillin it appears in Chinese mythology. A quillin has the body of a deer, but it's a unicorn, and it has scales on its body. I tried to get an actual photograph for you, but I couldn't find one. So this was the best that I could do. So this is the quillin, and when the quillin appears in Chinese mythology, it represents peacefulness. There will be peace. It ushers in a time of calm. So the Quillin not only appears at the birth of Confucius, but has in his mouth a jade stone. And on the jade stone, it says, there are several different versions of this. I chose one. A son of the Great Spirit is to be born. Someday he shall rule the land of Chao as a good and wise king. And then in another version that I read, it said, he will rule, but not as a king. He will rule as a spiritual man. So the Quillin appears, meaning peace, and has the jade stone in his mouth to deliver to the mother. Now, where are we? We're in Lu, and remember, this is the pre-Qin dynasty, the pre-unification, pre-China. It's during the time of the collapse of the Zhou dynasty and the Warring States. All right, and you can see that the Lu dynasty is not that big. Okay, so he's right here. And as Confucius grows, his father dies early, so he's raised by his mother. As he grows, he is proven to be a very wise beyond his years young man. So he's taken into the court, and he has many different jobs that he is assigned. He's the minister of this and the minister of that, and the court is very impressed with him, and he works directly with the Duke. Part of his job gives him access to the books, right? The books that the ancestors wrote, the wisdom of ages gone by, and he has access to all of this. These are the books that Qin Shi Huang will burn hundreds of years from our time right now. But Confucius has access to them, and he absorbs them, and he respects them, and he is getting the sensation that the forefathers, those that came before us, they had the wisdom, they should be listened to. And so he took all of this, an accumulation, an amalgamation of all of these thoughts, and put them together in his head. And that was how he was advising the court. And the Duke said to him, your wisdom is such that you should be teaching, not in here as the minister of this and that and the other thing, but you should be a teacher. And so Confucius has a school of philosophy and guess this? Socrates.
Oh my goodness.
I know, Effie. I was waiting for you to have a reaction to that.
I never made the connection.
Yes, so there is a school of philosophy pre-Socrates, but that's what we think of. We think of Socrates, and this predates Socrates. And who is he teaching? This isn't a school like we think of school. It's not teaching mathematics and writing and all of that. It's teaching leaders, because remember, where is he? He's in the courts, right? He's in the palace. So he's teaching who?
The leaders.
The leaders. He wants to teach them how to be good leaders, and he's getting the information about this from these ancestral writings, from these ancestors. And the leaders who have been kind of greedy, you know, taxing, taking, give me a tenth, give me more than that. And the people are not responding to that too well, are they? Because they're being heavily burdened. And so Confucius is trying to teach them morality, integrity, ethics. That's what he wants to impart for good leaders. People in this philosophy are inherently good. In Confucianism, they are inherently good, and they will do the right thing if they have leaders that they can respect. Do we agree?
Yeah, well, the complete opposite of what legalism is.
Exactly, yes. And if you're going to have a system where you want the people to respect their leaders, you want the leaders to have integrity and the respect will follow, well, where does that begin? In the home, right? It begins in the home. And so this is very focused on family, and this is how the system goes. Respect and reverence, okay? So it's ruler to the subject. So the subject should be in deference to the ruler. I know the ladies here are going to love this one. The wife should be in deference to the husband. So parent to child, and older sibling to younger sibling. So the younger, if you're younger in the family, you should have respect for your older sibling. As the oldest daughter in my family, I totally agree. All right, I think that's a wise philosophy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who's the oldest boy, the oldest child?
The family is where it all begins. So in his mind, Confucius is thinking, if you have respect in the family and the family unit is functioning properly, then you can go out into the world and you would respect your rulers, you would respect your leaders. It would be inbred. The children would grow up respecting their older sibling, respecting their parents, respecting their grandparents. In fact,
Respecting each other.
respecting each other. Yeah. Yes, that's the belief system. In fact, it doesn't just stop there, but Confucius is saying that we need to respect our ancestors that have passed away. All right, so in this system, Confucianism, there is ancestor worship. Do you see right here?
Yes.
Where they've passed away and you're still honoring them and you're still supplying for them. So he believed in that. Does this look familiar to anybody?
Yes.
All right. What does that remind you of?
Jesus Christ, statue.
Yeah. Right? 500 years before.
Yeah.
It's 500 years before. I know I have to kind of wrap this up right now. So in his lifetime, Confucius, he's running these schools and nothing is changing. And so he's kind of fed up too, just like Lao Tzu, who is thought to be a contemporary. It's thought that Confucius was a student of Lao Tzu. He also left, and he just wandered for years, wandered around the country, talking about these ideas that he has, his system, teaching people, and yet nothing ever changes. He's 73 years old when he dies, and he feels like he spent his whole entire life and he was a failure because all of the teaching that he did came to naught. Nothing came from it. Well, his students didn't think that of him, and they wrote down all of his teachings. And we have something called the Analects, where we can read the teachings. You've probably heard, quotes from Confucius, right?
Yes.
Everybody's heard quotes from, that's where it comes from. Now, interesting. The Han Dynasty, hundreds of years later, do you know what they did?
Go for heaven's sake.
Isn't that amazing? So hundreds of years after Confucius died, and despite Qin Shi Huang's effort to burn his books, he becomes the official state ideology. And to this very day, Confucianism is predominant, permeates all of the Chinese culture. Think about this for 1 minute. Just think about it for a second. Confucius admired, he had adoration for the ancestors who wrote down their philosophies and thoughts, correct? And then what does he become? He's the ancestor he becomes that thing that he idolized, and that is a great success story. And I hope in the whole Taoism of it all that somehow his energy is aware of the fact that he has lived on thousands and thousands and thousands of years later. Now, I have a suspicion that I know what you're thinking.
Did you forget something?
Yeah, you might think that I have forgotten something really important if we're talking about, predominant theologies of China. You probably thought I forgot this guy.
Buddha.
Right? Yes, everyone recognizes this. Everybody said Buddha. I did not forget. Okay? Because actually, Buddhism originates from India. This is Buddha. Okay? And it takes a little while for Buddhism to reach China. All right? And so we will get to that. Besides, I thought I should hold back on a little serenity. We might need it in a week or two with all the battles and stuff. So we'll have more serenity coming your way, and we will talk about Buddhism and that philosophy in China as we continue on with Imperial China. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And we'll see you next week. And Sage, you can push the, I don't know.